if everybody should move to the Black Star Square, the citizens should move to Black Star Square and say that the president should go home, he's likely to go home.
Much of the Cold War era was a wasted period for Africans. What is good for our leaders is not necessarily good for us.
At a point when ECOWAS was providing energy, today ECOWAS is in intensive care unit, but has not yet realized that it needs help. And so when individual countries come out to help, it can be misunderstood. When AU offers to help, it can be misunderstood.
We have failed to bring power down to the local communities, and it's making leaders very corrupt.
You're listening to the CDD-Ghana Democracy Dialogues podcast, a platform for meaningful conversations on governance, democracy, and development. From policy discussions to citizen perspectives, we explore key topics like electoral reforms, economic policies, and human rights. Join the conversation on YouTube, Spotify, and our website. Stay informed, stay inspired. This special episode of CDD-Ghana Democracy Dialogues explores global power dynamics and impacts on democratic governance and inclusive development in West Africa. Moderated by Dr. Birikorang, Director of Research at KAIPTC, this high-level panel discussion examines possible responses to changing global dynamics, shaping the region's future.
I'm Dr. Abdel-Fatau Musah, who is the current ECOWAS Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security. He served with the UN Office for West Africa before. He was also he served at the United Nations as Director of the West Africa Division in the Department of Political and Peace Building Affairs. I would also like to invite a friend of mine, but is Ambassador Gbevelo Lartey. He's Ghana's Special Envoy to the Alliance of Sahelian States. And before then, he was the AU Special Representative for Counterterrorism Cooperation and Director of the African Center for the Study and Research on Terrorism from April 2016 to May 2020. He is also a founder and chairman of Human Security Research Center, Ghana. I also have another fantastic excellency, Her Excellency Ms. Barrie Freeman, who is the Deputy Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for West and Central Africa, for West Africa and the Sahel. She brings over 30 years of experience in peace and security, having previously served in senior roles at the UN Mission in Kosovo, UN Mission in Central Africa, and the UN Peace Building Support Office. Before joining the UN, she held several leadership positions at the U.S. Department of State and the National Democratic Institute, and she has extensive work experiences across Africa, including West Africa. Ms. Freeman. Another excellency, Ambassador D.K Osei. He is the president of the Council on Foreign Relations Ghana and a seasoned diplomat with over 4 decades of experience. He has previously served as secretary to former President John Agyeku Kufuor, contributing to national policy, economic management, and diplomacy. He is a former minister plenipotentiary. He held key diplomatic postings in Paris, Guinea, Kinshasa, and Denmark, and played critical roles in conflict resolution efforts across Africa, including the DR Congo, Angola, Liberia, and Sudan. I also have Ambassador William Awinado Kanyirige, who is a seasoned Ghanaian diplomat and governance advisor, currently serving as a senior advisor at the African Union. He has previously held high-level diplomatic positions, including as Ghana's ambassador to Ethiopia and permanent representative to the AU and ECOWAS, as well as the UN Economic Commission for Africa and High Commissioner to Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you so much. And then I would call him Excellency as well, in the person of Professor Emmanuel Gyimah Boadi, who is a co-founder and current board chair of the Afrobarometer and co-founder and former executive director of the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, which, as we all know, is a leading independent democracy and good governance think tank in Ghana and West Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our panelists. I go now to Ambassador Gbevelo Lartey to answer this question. In context where security concerns are acute, we've seen how foreign powers often gain leverage through military or security partnerships. And sometimes these are to the detriment of those countries. How do you think, Ambassador, that those governments in the fragile states can assert agency and ensure democratic accountability in such partnership?
Well, thank you very much. To start with, it depends on what we mean by security. Because security concerns, I think, are acute all around, West Africa here today. Now, it's not about whether there is violence, but it's about, the livelihood issues of the individual citizen and the community. Now, if you're looking at the point of violence, we can say that Ghana has so developed its democracy today that if someone should stand up today in Ghana and take up arms that he is conducting a coup, he is likely to have so much resistance that he might just be thrown back into jail or, something. But if everybody should move to the Black Star Square, the citizens should move to Black Star Square and say that the president should go home, he's likely to go home. So I'm saying that when we are looking at security, we might want to decide what exactly we are talking about. Now, particularly because I'm now supposed to be looking at issues of the AES, I take it that your question also implies that, acute security concerns would be the kind of concerns we have in the AES today, and how can they, assert themselves. Well, that again comes to the matter of leadership. Because here you're asking me about, democracy. You're asking about democratic principles and all. But you see, the other time we went to see the leader of Burkina Faso, I went with the president. He told us very clearly that they are not practicing democracy. They are in a revolution. And that the democracy is the end. And that what they are concerned about now is to address the issue of terrorism. And that they want people to help them to address the issue of terrorism. When they are finished with the terrorism, they'll talk about democracy. So you can see that then again it becomes another issue as to how they assert themselves. So from that perspective, asserting themselves is about finding who is ready to assist them with weaponry to fight terrorism. They're looking at who is going to assist them, to fight terrorism, perhaps the Algerian way, and not, throwing into their faces the issues of human rights. Perhaps Algeria is a powerful country. So in the 90s, when they had their dark decade, they just dealt with the terrorists, and nobody in the world actually got hold of Algeria and said that these are human rights excuses. And eventually, it is out of what they did that those who ran away came to the Sahel and created, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, which has, transformed into all these terrorist groups that we are seeing today. So one might ask, if we want to really assert ourselves, could we deal with these terrorists like Algeria dealt with them? Because Algeria is now free from terrorism. So that is another aspect about fragility that we want to look at. Perhaps we might want to take some decisions as to how exactly the world wants terrorism to be dealt with. Because as it is today, one could say that it is quite unfair to states. Because when you are talking about counterterrorism from a human rights perspective, it is not like, the law of armed conflict, where two armies are fighting and they have the same rules. And when you get a prisoner of war, you don't do this to him and all that. But here with the terrorists, it's a one-way affair. Because, you have given the terrorist a revolving window. And then he comes and sweeps this place for us during the day. In fact, he might be the person serving us the water around here, but what he's actually doing is that he's watching exactly who will be here tomorrow. And he goes back and he tells his people, and tomorrow morning someone else comes to bomb us. So I think that it's a difficult situation talking about fragile, security situations and what we are. I think that we have to look at the situation more comprehensively as to what the situation is with us in West Africa today, what is causing the anxieties that are even provoking people to take over governments militarily and promise everybody that they are going to stop terrorism, and they come back and they are not able to stop it and things like that. I think it's a little bit more nuanced than it would appear.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Ambassador Gbevelo Lartey. And you spoke about actions and the interests of the people that are concerned and what they want to do. I just want to ask a final round of questions. It's one question for all of you. So like the National Science and Maths quiz, where the quiz mistress will give a preamble. So I'm giving a preamble. But yeah, it's one question. So looking forward, what one bold action, right, or shift would you recommend to strengthen the regions or states' responses in the face of global power competition? How do you think states should react? Just one bold action or shift that you think should be taken. I would like to start with Prof. Gyimah Boadi, and then we'll come this way, please.
Thank you. You have deprived me of material for responding to the question. But skipping all these great breaks. But so in the absence of anything meaningful to say, I would advise that our leaders, as well as ourselves, as activists, as citizens, we back away from this trend whereby we think that the devil that we don't know, which is the new global powers, is better than the devil that we know, which is the West and NATO and the rest. I think it's just that logic simply doesn't make sense. At best, we should seek to know all of them first, know them for what they are, and then decide and determine what we need from them that is good for us. Second is that there's a tendency for us to think that, so we had the Cold War era. During the Cold War era, there was opportunity for our leaders to pick between the West or the East to get something from China or from the United States or Russia or wherever. But in those times, our leaders did not necessarily pick their allies and friends and support and resources necessarily for the benefit of citizens. And so much of the Cold War era was a wasted period for Africans. We should ask ourselves today, and I'm providing some sort of a criteria for judging what is good for us. It's whether, first, to know that what is good for our leaders is not necessarily good for us. Unless we are talking about governments that are truly democratic and accountable and responsive to us, then they will be motivated and will be guided to get help and get support and to pick allies whose help and support aligns with the interests of the people and not simply or just exclusively in the interest of the leaders, incumbent, and parties.
Thank you so much for that. We need to know them for ourselves, and then we can determine what is good for us. Ambassador William, please.
Tom, I like to play agent provocateur, and I have a difficulty with even the framing. We're talking about global shifts, and then we zero into foreign interests and things like that. I think it should rather provoke us to look inwards, because Africa is part of the global system. And so our focus then should be how to organize ourselves in a rapidly changing global system in which we have played a part, sometimes as passive players, as objects, and sometimes also as subjects. But let me quickly add this. We're actually inspired by what my brother, Ambassador at Large, your appointment has created quite an interesting vibe. And my brother Fatau knows what I'm talking about because we are on the same platform. And some of your ECOWAS staff completely fail to understand the strategic nature of the appointment. And this is one of the problems we are facing. We're not looking inwards. What do you call it? For the past centuries, there have been global shifts. Is Africa part of that? We've missed critical conjunctures where we should leverage, and more recently, when COVID struck, Council on Foreign Relations under the leadership of Ambassador D.K Osei organized a webinar. And it came out clearly that this is an opportunity for us to recalibrate because it threw up certain energies, particularly from the youth, in terms of innovation in our various countries. What happened? Missed opportunity. Same thing happened in Ebola. Same thing happened after independence. When Nkrumah said, United States of Africa, and Nyerere came here 40 years later at our independence anniversary and confessed that they should have listened to Nkrumah. An official of a foreign power collaborating with ECOWAS those days told me around 2002-03 that we need to watch the Sahel, those ungoverned spaces. At that time, I wasn't as educated as I became later. And I was saying to myself, what is this guy talking about? They had already foreseen. And this brings me to the point that we need to, in terms of moving forward, have a clear understanding of geopolitics and geostrategy as African countries and stakeholders in this very complex world. And not to be so narrow-minded, whereby a media person can write in a newspaper and say, why is Ghana buying onions from Niger or tomatoes from Burkina Faso? Meanwhile, if you look at the term trade balance, outside of Nigeria because of energy, Burkina, at some point, if not today, was the leading importer of goods from Ghana, mostly industrial goods. So they should be just buying from us. What did we learn in school? So geopolitics and geostrategy in this rapidly changing world calls for us, think tanks, CSOs, parliamentarians, public servants, local government authorities, to be properly anchored so that the decisions we take appreciate the international dynamics and the local dynamics and the interplay. Number two, our integration strategy is wobbling. It is not moving with 4 wheels. It is moving on 3 wheels, in sometimes even 2 wheels. And ECOWAS, you know this better than I do. At a point when ECOWAS was providing energy, today ECOWAS is in intensive care unit, but has not yet realized that it needs help. And so when individual countries come out to help, it can be misunderstood. When AU offers to help, it can be misunderstood. We are doing part-time integration. Moving forward, let's do full-time integration as the EU has done. How can we get up and go and take decisions and come back and undermine the same decisions? So let's look inwards. 3, our education content and pedagogy is not helping us. We are having a system which is so complex, and then you go to African countries and then you see churches springing up in place of industry and with some schizophrenic religion being played out. And then you will see them on social media. Youth from China, the way they are trained, Nordic countries, and then compared to our youth. Then we learn ABC, 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. Then they go to church. The same, somebody from Fatau's village who has never been to school is actually prophesying on Fatau and others. Fatau is a Muslim, by the way. And then we, public servants and politicians, They will pray for our presidents. My goodness, state capture, wrong way. But let me not be too long because there are others who are speaking, but we need to look inwards. Let's reframe. It's not about what others are doing. It's first, what are we doing as it relates then to what others are doing so that together we can mutually benefit from the changes, because it is a two-sided affair. Yeah. There are challenges and there are heavy opportunities that we're not leveraging. Thank you.
That's fantastic. So there are challenges and there are good opportunities that we need to look at by thinking strategically, as you mentioned. Ambassador K, if Ambassador William hasn't said everything there is to say.
Yes. You see, when they were talking about seniority, you can see that, as older ambassadors, we don't have very much to say. So you asked me for just one recommendation. I will give you one recommendation. I think we need to build what I call a continental foreign engagement compact. That compact will be it will be a unified framework under the guise of the AU, anchored in the sub-regional organizations. What I'm suggesting is that the existing framework to provide a unified voice to engage the external world is not working. And maybe we can discuss the details of this idea that I have later.
Thank you so much. Unified voice, I think, compact, continental foreign engagement compact, as you have said. We'll keep that in mind. Ms. Freeman, please.
Thank you. And this is getting more and more difficult. No, but I want to make a recommendation pertaining to security, because I think this security challenges that the region faces, principally the security challenges from terrorism and terrorism's connections to transnational organized crime, has got to be addressed. And I think that one way to bring the countries of the region together with the UN, with the AU, with member states is through implementation of Security Council Resolution 2719. It was passed in 2023. I'd like to point out that Ghana, then as a member of the Security Council, led the drafting and negotiation of this resolution. And it hasn't been implemented. And again, I'm not speaking of, this is not an official UN position, because I know at the AU, a lot of the conversation has been about applying it for Somalia, or in all these other, in other parts of Africa, when to me it makes the most sense in the Sahel specifically to fight terrorism. I think it would be a way of bringing the countries together with these member states who are so fragmented in their approaches to security, such as, the external players like Russia, for example, as a member of the P5, they would be drawn into this conversation. And then, learning from the other peace operations in the region, whether they were UN or whether the G5 Sahel, which failed. Why? The multinational joint task force for the Lake Chad Basin, which has had some success, but is now, Niger has pulled out. Chad is threatening to pull out. The Accra initiative, which I think has, a lot of promise, but hasn't really gotten off the ground, and the ECOWAS standby force. Perhaps this could all be brought together around 2719. And just the purpose of 2719 is to ensure predictable and sustainable financing for AU-led peace operations. So that would be my suggestion, but also to focus on the kinetic and the non-kinetic aspects of such an operation, to get at what Fatau laid out about what these terrorist groups are doing, where they're really creating these mini states. And to break that down, you also need the trade, the economic integration to kind of go alongside a security response, because a security response on its own doesn't work. But that would be my suggestion.
Ambassador Lartey, I think Ambassador Freeman has brought it right to your doorstep.
Well, I really think so.
Yes.
But again, she said it all in that vein. And therefore, I'd rather want to look at the issue of the frame, the shaping of what exactly we are trying to do. What is the difficulty? What is the challenge, and how are we approaching it? Ambassador talked about, how the youth are brought up in the first place. You see, traditionally in Ghana, when you go to your village, if you remember that prayer that is said, that prayer seeks to make you even corrupt. They say that when you go, you should get money and bring it to the house and come and look after the family and build a house. When you kick a stone, you should turn it to gold and things like that. It's about the fact there is nothing about Ghana in that prayer. And we lost it when we lost the Young Pioneer movement, which we could not reshape after changing, after Nkrumah left. We could have maintained it for our youth development. We have nothing that is bringing up our youth to have a certain orientation. And we are doing a lot of planning without involving our youth. African Union, for instance, was doing their Agenda 2063. A lot of the people who were sitting down to write the Agenda 2063 will not be alive in 2063. But they did not involve those young people who are going to live, in that time. And we also forgetting that the youth today are in a world of their own. It's a digital space in which, the things that they are experiencing are not the things that we experience. And we are struggling to keep pace. But we want to provide the leadership, in everything. And I think that is a difficulty. Now, let me end by also saying that there is also some serious disconnect with the local communities. See, we have failed to bring power down to the local communities. And it's making leaders very corrupt. Because you want to build a toilet in the village and you are awarding the contract in Accra. Meanwhile, there is a district assembly which could have, awarded the contract down there. So that again is one other aspect of it all. If we are talking about democratic principles and growing them and sustaining them, then it means that we will have to involve the local communities and make sure that they are empowered in decision making so that they can feel like part of it. Let me end by, remarking again that I have remained very disappointed that up till now, Ghana has still not ratified that African Charter, on the values and principles of decentralization and local economic development. That charter really, puts the hands of corrupt leaders, out there. Because once you have taken up to that, it prescribes how things should be done. And it cuts away a lot of the opportunity for taking bribes and being corrupt. But many African countries have still not ratified that. And I think that Ambassador William and his people should, do something that will help shape the governance and help shape the democratic and security issues that we are looking at there from.
That's a really good intervention, because you mentioned the youth and the local community. I think those are really critical components that we keep forgetting about in all of the discourse. And so, Ambassador, your final 2-3 minutes to answer my question on what critical action we can take.
If I were in an example, I would just say all of the above. And then all of the above, and then, end it there. I feel that there are critical things we must do. Africa should talk to itself and not to outsiders. I think one clear example of talking to outsiders and not to Africans is even the development of NEPAD. The new Partnership for Africa Development. Many people call it NEPAD. Okay, that it is like putting a pad on the knee and going to beg, because that was it. Look, Africa is in a global competition of inequality. Nobody, you cannot present your, roadmap to a potential or real competitor to help you to compete with them. Okay, so Africa should see itself as a continent of people who are under international sanctions. Okay, in fact, if you check around the world, those countries that went through sanctions, they developed faster than those not. One of them is apartheid South Africa. Okay. And, today, they say Russia is the most sanctioned country in the world. But according to IMF, World Bank statistics, it is the fastest developing economy in Europe and even globally. Okay, so we have to look inward. That is number one. Number two, we must do less talking and do more action. Okay, look, between ECOWAS, African Union, and the other sub-regional organizations, we have got more normative document than UN. On every aspect, it is the implementation. Okay, so if we do not shift, from crafting very lofty documents to taking action to implement them, we are going to be in real trouble. And then, what would I say? Also that, look, if you look at, I'm just taking West Africa, where do the threats come from? Okay, the environment in which we live. West Africa has 4 vulnerable, zones, right? Whose vulnerability could be turned into an advantage.
Yeah.
But we always see it as a disadvantage. Everybody talks about the Sahel as, environmental degradation, whatnot and whatnot. Geologists, or how do they call them, have found that the water mass under the Sahel, if it is mined, can actually make the whole of the Sahel green again. Okay, but nobody is interested in going there. These are some of the areas. If you solve that water problem in the Sahel, and then there are real, water reserve underneath, you solve a lot of problem. How did Boko Haram, where is Boko Haram operating? Boko Haram operates around Lake Chad. Okay, that's why they call it Lake Chad Basin. That's where Boko Haram, Islamic State, and others. Why are they operating around Lake Chad? Because the young people and then the local community survived on the local ecosystem that was provided by Lake Chad. And over the years, Lake Chad lost 90% of its water mass. Okay, so those who lived off the lake, Lake Chad, what alternative do they have? So they become easy recruits for terrorist organizations. Okay, the next is the Gulf of Guinea. I'm talking about West Africa. The Gulf of Guinea is could be the engine of the blue economy, for the region. But people emphasize piracy, bunkering, illegal fishing, dumping of toxic waste, and not adding value to it. So let's switch the talk from the negative to positive. Finally, the fourth zone, Futajalon Mountains. Futajalon Mountains, that is where all the major rivers in West Africa take their source from. It could be a source of electrification energy for the whole of the region. But we are allowing it to die. Those are the areas. If you create that infrastructure, you maintain it, in fact, you do not need to be teaching, young people and other things. They would find. Today, my little son is more computer savvy than me. They, get energy. Yes, get energy, get that these, young people would do what, miracle, for the continent. So I feel that, maybe those are the various, the point that I want to make. Africa needs to implement.
Okay.
I think that's the key word here.
Okay. Thank you all so much. I won't even try to summarize because Ambassador just said, let's talk more action. So it just means we need to stop this conversation now and take action by moving. And so if you would permit me and join me to thank our panelists for this very insightful, their thoughts, sharing their experiences with us. We really appreciate it. And we thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the CDD-Ghana Democracy Dialogues podcast. Stay engaged, stay informed, and be part of the conversation on governance, democracy, and development. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and visit our website for more insightful discussions.